All right, this video is for one person in a billion that might actually want to fix this radio. Okay? Now, I told you in the last video, it doesn't have the same name as this video. Got to go look for it. This LiPo pack, I guess it's called LiPo, lithium, heavy, there's only 2 strips of double sticky. I said a whole piece, but it was a bitch to get this up. And there's a circuit board on this thing. Oh, and you can see my pry marks. I pried it up. There's a charge circuit that's built into this thing. So if you order another battery, you probably have to solder this on, or maybe it comes on the battery. I don't know. But I did get it out, and it was over the circuit that I wanted. Okay? There's no way you could troubleshoot this radio or look at anything with this on there. So this had to come off. And besides having 2 strips of double sticky, it also had this yellow tape, hope I'm in the frame, that went around the back side of the board. So this basically was glued down as though it was going to go on a rocket ship. Okay, so I got it up, and right away you can follow the antenna in, and it goes to this little tiny chip, little teeny weeny itsy bitty chip. Now when you look at the chip, and I had to use high-end optics, I used this thing. These at that magnification are worthless to read the number on that chip. So I used this with my naked eye, and I was able to read the number of the chip. And it was a 42641. So I keyed that in the internet with the word IC after it, and bingo bango, it came up with this. And there's several pages on this. But why did I look this chip up? Well, this chip has a few pins that aren't soldered. Now, if you look at this radio, every IC on it has every single pin soldered except this one. All right. Now, what does this chip do? This chip switches the antenna. Now, we know the radio received FM with the original program. I flashed it. It receives FM with the flash, but it won't receive AM. Now, the chip that doesn't have certain pins soldered, which it would be nice to have the schematic, because then I could figure out using, there is a dot on the chip. Make sure I'm in the frame. And you can count the pins, and you count the pins that aren't soldered. You write them down on a piece of paper. Then you go to the schematic and see if they're used. Okay? And if they are used, you got to solder. Now you say, well, how are you going to solder something that small? Well, here's my experience. And here's my story. Worked in Radio Shack. And a guy came in, and he told me he bought a Sinclair. Now, remember Timex built Timex Sinclair computers? Well, the same guy, Chive Sinclair, in let's say 1974, 75 area, he came out with a digital watch kit. And you had to solder very tiny ICs, very tiny. And the kid came into the store, and he had built one. He said he had several kits, and he showed me. He got it working, but he said it was really annoying to solder. And I told him, I said, you take a soldering iron, okay, you clean the tip up first. You take a very small piece of copper wire that has no insulation on it, and you wrap it around the tip of the soldering iron, and you come off. You turn the soldering iron on, and that little end, on the end of the tiny little piece of copper wire, you tin it, and that becomes your solder tip. Now, this is even smaller, but if I find out that the pins that aren't soldered are active pins, then I have to solder. And I do have flux. Okay? I do have the flux for soldering ICs. But these are really small. So anyway, I look at the IC, and there's several pins that aren't soldered. Yet all the other ICs in this radio have all the pins soldered, whether they're active or not. All right, now, what does this chip do? It switches the antenna. You have an antenna hooked up to the radio, comes in over here on this gold, whatever type connector that is. I don't memorize connectors. I stopped off at BNC, PL259s, Motorola plug for car radio. I know most of my plugs, but I never kept up with this ham radio stuff, okay? Because I did have a Type N connector. I had to buy a Type N connector one time when I was building a microwave dish. That's another story. Well, anyway, so this little IC switches the antenna to different sections of the radio, okay? So the theory is the pins that are soldered are allowing the signal to go to the FM section, but not to the other sections. So the FM works and the other ones don't work. Now, this is only a theory. I'm going to tell you, in life, sometimes things are this lucky. All right, you open something up, you look into it, and you see the problem right away. Now, I do see a pad under the lead that's not soldered. The best I can see using high-end optics. I don't have anything better than this, except this. And this is plastic lenses. There's distortion. I'm probably getting cataracts to start with on top of it all. But right now, that's where I am. This little chip right here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's 1/8 inch square, if it's that. Yeah, about 1/8 inch square. 4 pins on each side, and there's several that aren't soldered. Now, will that fix it? I don't know. Now, you see my battery. I had to pry it off. I actually used this. I tried everything to get that battery off. All right? You saw the size of the double sticky. What are you going to do? You know what I mean? You can't troubleshoot the radio unless you take the battery off. The battery's put on there like a final thing. Okay? Now, how I'm operating the radio. It does come up using one of my power supplies and one of these, I call it a USB. It's actually got another number for this type of connector. But you plug this in, and the radio does come on. Yeah, it's come on. That's all right. Oh, it doesn't want to show you it, huh? So the radio is on in test mode, okay? And I really hate this cable that goes to the display. It's springy. I can disconnect it inside the radio, but how am I going to get my fingers in there to put the connector back on? How does this come out of the case? I'm in area of life, something I don't have experience with. Okay. Now, if I go on the internet and ask for it, there's probably got to be one other guy in a billion that's actually taken one of these apart. Now, there's going to be a lot of people that have built the kit. I believe there was a kit for this, or they were trying to build one. I don't know. But you're talking one person in a billion will actually try to fix one of these. And you're going to say, oh, there's got to be more than that. This is a throwaway radio. It doesn't work, you throw it away. Now, there was a guy, actually a guy on the internet with a YouTube. He got 10 of these for $10 each or something in the store, and they have various problems. And I could see these two chips look like they were soldered by hand. Okay? The other ones look like they were done, how would we say, with the heat. Used to be called a heart machine. You heat the chip up, and then you have a dot of this liquid. It turns a certain color, and that's when you know the solder has flowed. Okay, the pins come tin, the board comes tin. You put a bunch of flux around it. You lay the IC down. You heat it up with hot air, and it solders itself. You can also put this in some people use toaster ovens, and I know all about this stuff. We had the heart machine at work where I worked. Okay, and we had a guy, and his job was to remove the chip for you and to resolder a new one for you. All right, but he had a drinking problem. I won't say his name, and he'd go out to the car and he'd fall asleep or whatever, and he'd leave the heart machine running, and he'd burn a hole through the board. Did that several times. Yeah, I worked with idiots, absolutely. Sorry, but I did. And right now, that I actually found the chip, and it actually does exactly what the Russian booklet says the first chip does. And you come in off the antenna. Now you switch the antenna input between different sections of the radio. And my theory is, when it's in FM, this section that does FM is wired, and the other sections don't work because they forgot to solder the connections. That's the theory as it is now. Now, because I look and I see pins that aren't soldered. So What I have to do is now look at this chip, find out where the dot is, figure out what pin numbers they are, go over to the Russian schematic, and hopefully it's the same pins. All right? It's a different chip, but it's the same idea. And then before I touch anything, I'm being very cautious. I'm using scientific method. Just resolder those wires and get it over with. I'm not like that. I want to understand what the hell I'm doing. Okay? Because after you solder those wires, did you burn the chip out? Did you see, when you know what you're doing, it's less likely to screw you over. Okay? But having that battery pack on top of there, that took me a while. And you see the pry marks that I showed you. It was a bitch to get it off. Okay? And it left some of the sticky tape on the board, which I'm not touching. I learned, let a sleeping dog lie. Fix what you think the problem is. Now, you saw the radio still powers up. So we haven't gone too deep into a rabbit hole at this point. When I lifted the battery pack up, it didn't seem to rip any components off. Okay? So we're at a point now where logically it says that chip should have been soldered. It's not soldered. That's the problem. But I learned in life, don't believe it. Now, I just watched the Shango video. I think this is the 4th television in a row that he's worked on that just started or was working. Okay? And it's an old Predicta Insides. And it's got those cupolas or whatever, those integrated circuits. We'll call them integrated circuits. They're resistors and capacitors in a module. And that's what my dad used to call them, integrated circuits. And then later on, there's also another name for them, I can't recall. But in other words, that's when they started saying, let's put several parts in a module. Now, way back, I believe it was Philco. The terminal on the back of the radio, underneath the tube radio, had capacitors inside this block. And my one neighbor used to say, it's very simple to push. You push a pin through it, and it pushes the blob of parts and stuff out. It's very easy to do, but he used to use that as an excuse not to fix certain radios. And he had excuses for everything. I bitch and moan, but I don't make excuses. I tell you, I'm going to have a problem getting that battery off there. That bothered me. Now, probably, if I had to do it again, I'd put a piece of plastic up against the battery and then put this between the circuit board and the piece of plastic. So when I rinked this, it would lift the battery off without putting any dents in it. I didn't know that. I never worked with a lithium battery that's been double sticky taped to a circuit board. And I had no option. You can't get to that IC to resolder it, to change it, to troubleshoot it with that battery on top. Now, I hope you glean some information on how I think, and that's the way I work. And all those ICs are marked, so you can go on the internet and find each one. And as you read what each one does, there's a better picture than this. This is basically the pinout. It actually shows switches inside like double pole, double throw switches inside the IC. I think there was a chip called a CD4066 years ago. It was an analog switch, and you could use it to switch data. This is basically the same thing, only it'll switch RF. Okay? So your signal comes into the antenna, and it goes to this IC chip. And then by changing the binary number going to the chip, it outputs the signal in one of 3 places. I believe it's 3 sides. All right, one side's power and stuff. So let's see, RF, hold on, 1. Yeah, there's 3 RF outputs. Okay, you got 1, 3, so there's got to be a 2. Oh, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So by sending binary numbers into this thing, it'll put the antenna out of 1 to 4 different places. Okay, and that's how you can have 4 different sections on this board. And when it needs the antenna, the processor sends a signal over to the switch, and it takes the antenna, comes in, it goes to FM. Antenna comes in and goes to VHF. Antenna comes in and goes to shortwave. So I'm hoping that the fact that that's not soldered right, that's the problem. But it's a great theory, but you know how reality is. I think that's it. All right, that's it.